What is going on, everyone? It's David Palmer King and Dr. Ann Wohlcke here with History in the Stars. We'll be covering the astrology of the 100 Years' War. Really looking forward to this episode. Good to be with you all. How are you doing, Dr. Ann Wohlcke?
How am I doing today, David Palmer? Today I'm doing well, and I am so happy because Neptune is moving again, right?
Thank God.
Or I don't know if it's moving, but it's not going backwards anymore, right? And this whole, actually today when I woke up and I felt so much lighter than I had before. I mean, honestly, I felt better today. Maybe I'm just making it up, but I didn't remember that today was the day, that it was finally the 10th. And when I realized it, after having watched your daily horoscope, I decided to use Hypergate AI. I sound like a commercial for you. Get Hypergate. But I used it to just remind myself, okay, what was the month and year when Neptune went into Pisces? And I thought about my life. I think it was, I don't remember, March 2011, or was it? When I thought about my life since then, I know it's my 10th house, but everything about my career direction changed in that transit. Went a little bit crazy. I mean, it really did.
It was like
so
a
much
washing
changed.
machine, like being on, like, changing modes. Like, oh, I guess we're doing blankets. And then, no, let's do an extra spin. You know, like, it's, and then, no, now we're going to throw in the dryer and it's going to tumble dry low. And then it's going to go really high. It's just like, whoa, that's so Pisces. But I would say, and dare that I even say this, but because this was the last outer planet in our lives to station direct for the last time in its home sign. So we saw Pluto in Scorpio in the 80s into 95. So we lived through that. This is for people that are born, I guess, pre-85. Mm-hmm. We've lived through Uranus and Aquarius that followed Pluto and Capricorn. And now Neptune and Pisces, the last station direct. That I think it's a combo of all those three, on top of Neptune, of course, being in its domicile home. But if you don't believe in astrology, the feeling of the energy, the weight that has lifted in just the last 12 hours is greater than any other moment in any astrological moment I could even use as an example. Like, where you're really like, what the heck? What just got off my back? Like, what energetically just went?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
I mean, it was so much so that today I was having a conversation with my friend Frankie, and we were and she's in Florida and I'm out here, and we were both feeling similar things and noticing how the energy has shifted. And I just started to wonder, is Neptune in Pisces the most potent transit? And then I started to think, well, I wonder what Jupiter in Pisces is like, because back when that was the only ruler of Pisces, that would have been a big deal for people. But it just seems like something big happened while Neptune was in Pisces. And so that's why I was thinking about I was hoping we could look at Neptune in Pisces today, since it's almost back in Aries, but just to sort of think about what transpires while Neptune is in Pisces. I'm curious about what you think about why Neptune in Pisces seems so significant, or if we just all have deluded ourselves that it is the most important transit. I don't feel that way. And then I started to look back, because I know we've talked about the time when Neptune went into Aries under Henry VIII. And, it seems like we've gone back to that a couple of times. And I started to think, well, what was happening before that? Like what happened in an earlier Neptune through Pisces transit? And that was when I started to look at the 100 Years' War and realized that when Neptune went into Aries during the 100 Years' War, it was when things started to go bad for the English. So that was the first thing that got me to start looking at the 100 Years' War.
Well, I think it's smart when you're doing reoccurrence in astrology, and you're we've done quite a lot, right? We've gone, especially the specifics of covering the Reformation period, because of the fact Pluto was also in Aquarius at the same degree as now, as Neptune in Aries. So the last time you saw that was less than 500 years ago, but we're rounding up. But then it's kind of like, okay, we like to look at 1692 and the witch trials with Neptune in Pisces, but we're not looking at the exact moments of Neptune when it's stationing direct for the last time or ingressing into the sign for the first time. But it's like we haven't gone, oh, what happened prior to the Reformation and that Neptune? And gone, what happened when it did leave Pisces in its last station and then go into Aries? Right? So we're doing that right now with the Civil War. That's the one that we all are using in astrology, right? Like the last time was the Civil War. Well, it's kind of interesting. There's always like a war involved, ironically, or a schism. Mm-hmm. Right? It's war or schism. And both in many ways are very similar. I think it's awesome because I think, there's a lot of parallels with Neptune of like, a very unconscious, and then people who believe they're conscious battle, right? It's like, who's the awake one and who's not? Who has the essence of spiritual truth, right? Mm-hmm. Which, that's the problem with why Neptune in Pisces kind of is difficult, because of the split in the collective, and then people like becoming very, hard-headed in their beliefs. And that's why Jupiter is the original ruler of Pisces, is that there is the shadow side of it, right? But there's the beautiful part of it too with Pisces that it adds. But there is this kind of like overinflated element, and also very lost, and also very not able to see clearly at all. And that includes, especially, and I would say foremost, your psychological, stuff, right? Because we don't know sometimes. And so when you think of like all these situations that Neptune's brought about, there's a lot about demonizing. Mm-hmm. And that could look religiously, or that could look like, no, you're not the line, you're not the king, you're not allowed to be this. And so I think it's great to go into this part of the history, because it actually, I think, has a lot more substance than people might realize today to refer to. And I think it's going to be great. It was funny because to use history, December 10th was the date I went to boot camp back in 2002. So for me, this year was kind of like an easy remembering day. December 10th, for me, like 23 years ago, I went to boot camp.
Wow.
I know. So I'm 41, so that's over half my life, ago.
Yep.
But I think it's going to be great.
I hope so. I mean, there are so many things that I have been thinking about in the context of Neptune and at this final degree of Pisces. And a lot of it's been playing out right now. And I was thinking, well, we could go into like the Candace Owens, Tim Pool fight with everyone weighing in, or Candace Owens and her Charlie Kirk theories, and the fractures that are happening within groups, and the anger people have about the fractures that are happening. And then other people doubling down on what they say, this is the truth, and I'm going after the truth. And all of those things just made me think it's such a Neptune in Pisces world. And it's like you feel like it's going to fracture. And I know we've talked about the Civil War before, the American Civil War, which I have to specify as a British historian. But when you think about the 100 Years' War, and if we think about Edward III, the King of England, and, John II or Charles V in France, if you zoom out, it kind of connects us to last week, where we were talking about the US presidents and how there's this line that most of them have this connection that can go all the way back to Charlemagne. And the 100 Years' War was a fight between two monarchs who were really also claiming the legacy of Charlemagne.
Right.
Because both sides were connected to him, as in, most ruling families in Europe, they're all connected to Charlemagne. But in this case, it can be seen as a type of civil war because Isabella of France had married the king in England, Edward II. Edward II was a weak king. He was deposed, and some say that she may have murdered him. And she started to claim France because she was French herself, right? So she's claiming France for her son, who would become Edward III one day. And it's through this female claim, which we were talking about last time as well. It's this female claim to the throne or to a territory or to a royal prerogative that is what causes this 100 Years' War to break out. So in a lot of ways, it is like a civil war that's playing out across, France and England, because England's claiming so many of the French territories.
Right. Well, and for people that want to know, through movie history, the Braveheart movie, right? The son of Edward I, who plays gay and has his little boy lover, and that Edward I pushes out of the castle, says, "Who's talking to me like this?" and kills his little boyfriend, his little boy toy. And then Isabella of France, who's in the movie, who they have, of course, Mel Gibson, who's playing, what's his name? Jeez.
I always want to say Rob
William
Wright,
Wallace, right?
Yes, William Wallace.
They try and show William Wallace tapped Isabella of France in the movie, which is kind of interesting. But the frailty and the unlovable, because that's kind of more of what the history kind of says, the unlovable king. Plus the instability with the Scottish, right, that was going on, and the independence for Scotland. It kind of is very similar to American history, Civil War, or especially even independence. There's a lot to that kind of coming in, but especially, 1337, May 24th is the technical date that historians say is the beginning of that war. And you also have the Black Plague that comes just 10 years later after that. So the 100 Years' War also encapsulates the Black Plague. It encapsulates astrologers who are actually really good at that time and creating conjunctional astrology and actually using that and making amazing predictions like the Black Plague and getting it completely right. So it's actually an interesting Neptune transition, because it's one of how powerful it really is and how it's playing out in very big schisms, whether it's civil or whether it's between countries or whether it's between relationships or whether it's all over the place. It's kind of and I think that's what does create the Black Plague in many ways.
Is Neptune, where was Neptune at the time of the Black Plague? Was it in Aquarius? Or, because I was looking up the dates, I went old school and wrote it down of when Neptune went into Pisces. I think it was 1356, April 2nd, 1356, its first ingress into Pisces. And then it went out until 1357, end of January.
Right.
So that's the other thing, is that it seems to me like Neptune in Pisces has that element of feeling forsaken, like humanity is feeling like, what's going on? We had everything figured out. We had this disease, and now there's fewer people, and they're trying to rebuild, and there's civil war, and it seems like such a confusing time for so many people. And then the time that's considered to be the beginning of the 100 Years' War, it's 1337. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I had a date. And it goes till 1453, which is a significant time for English history, because that's then the beginning of a whole new reign, like the Tudors.
Right.
So this is also the story of the Plantagenet dynasty and their inner rivalries as well. And that line ends, and this completely new line takes over. And then there's the War of the Roses in the midst of that end part of it. So It's a really strange time.
Yeah, and I think in history too, it's like, we think of like world wars, right? Well, there's world wars prior to us claiming in the 20th century World War I. Like this is really an extended world war that lasts for 100 years in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also just like the back history of like the whole entire Holy War coming to a close and the West completely being defeated and Christianity being defeated in the Holy Land, right? So everybody has to come back to their countries, and there's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of of course, the Templar Knights just 30 years prior get disbanded and killed. And so, there's a lot of resentment, I think, building. And that's what, Neptune in Aquarius actually could really kind of bring up, is like this feeling like, these people, because Neptune deals with feelings of like, I was deceived by these people. Right? Like I was doing all the help, and I was not getting any compassion back. So if you think about every family, most, I would say, had a husband who tried, or at least desired, or did contribute to the Holy War.
Mm-hmm.
And so their kids, and then their kids, right? Because it's kind of quick. People die at 30 is the average age, something like that, 35 at that time. Like it's just like these stories that start building up too, right? And then it's like, we're all feeling, and then you got black plagues that show up and all these kind of things. And it's contesting, because I think this idea of contesting power is very connected to that Neptune Pisces, whether it's from spiritual power, like the witch hunts is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
The Civil War in America is a great example based upon, the rights and whether or not you can own a human being and not treat them as human, but as property.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge kind of like extreme too. But then, it comes down to who is the rightful line for the monarchy, and the correct, what would that be, like the procession of that? Like that comes down to it?
Mm-hmm. Succession.
Mm-hmm. And it's all connected to Charlemagne. Like, it's like that's where we were kind of bridged on the last episode on how the Thanksgiving and the Mayflower and all that actually comes down to Charlemagne. But I think it's great that we actually get to come to this part, which actually is an interesting thing, because at that time, there is no Church of England. That's the other part, right? So it's really the Catholic Church that is supreme in the West as the only religion. The Christian religion it's technically the Catholic religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but then you have people like the Knights Templars who were trying to kind of alter that course in many ways. And so, yeah, I think then once you see people that you're rooting for Of course, there was no televisions, but I think if I was back then and if I was rooting for the Knights Templar and to see them be disbanded and then tell my son that, and then 30 years later, my son and his son are like, yeah, screw this king. He's not part of that fight or effort. He didn't even help or something like, like I think there's going to be a lot of that. That's part of it and I think that's what's really hard about Neptune. If we look at the chart of the actual historical date of the beginning of 100-year war, it's not really relatable to the times we're in now, except North Node Pisces, right? You see that at 10 degrees there. Mars retrograde in Scorpio, I think that's the interesting part with Saturn. I was actually born with those two, and I was born when they just came direct. And in 1984, we had that, like that. But again, that's also really an interesting one because it's like, when is there ever the moment when people are going to give up? With Mars and Saturn and Scorpio, not until the end. And if it's retrograde, not only on the outside, but on everybody's internal inside, and it gets to like, who's going to be the one that like ends it for good? Who's going to be the one that really like cuts the head off at the end or
That's interesting.
Right? So, and that's kind of how it is, because what happens is it does get to a point, and really I think it's Henry V at the end of the day who really becomes the superstar at the end. And actually that's the irony about this whole journey of secession, right? It's kind of like who's the one who's willing to go into battle themselves and not be afraid and show the men that he is with his countrymen and he is not afraid. He's not asking you to go to the front line. He's the guy running in front of everybody else. And that's what I think is the most interesting part about the 100 Years' War, is that is actually this Mars-Saturn retrograde in Scorpio. Right? That imprinted with a Pluto in Aries, with Chiron in Aries. So there's another Chiron thing. And so what is it? It's this big identity wounding, and it's got a Mars retrograde in Scorpio. And so we haven't seen that, right? Chiron came in Aries in 2019. Right? It dipped in for a second in 2018, then it came back 2019. And we have not seen Mars retrograde since 2016. So we're not seeing a Mars retrograde during the Chiron Aries. So there's something about Chiron Aries there. And then Pluto in Aries dispositing Mars, and Mars is retrograde with Saturn. That's going to be a long, dark war. And during these periods, guess what happened? There was a plague. There was all these things, right? The Black Plague of all of them, the Black Death. I mean, over half the population died on the planet. And it wasn't from the war.
Right.
But what's interesting is if you just see where that Mars and Saturn are in 1337, what the astrologers were doing back then for conjunctional astrology was going, oh, Jupiter's in Gemini. So in the next like 6 years, I would be in Sag. And then in 7, oh, okay. It's going to start coming into Sag, and then it's going to come into Capricorn, and then it's going to come into Aquarius. Oh, and that's right, when Saturn will be in Aquarius 7 years, right? Like, oh, and then that's when Mars, when it comes around to me with Jupiter and Saturn, that's going to be, and if they're all together, oh, and they're all in Aquarius, oh, that's 1345, and that's when they go to the Pope. There's going to be a plague, and and 1347 it pops up. It was all through watching the conjunctional astrology. And then we had the same conjunctional astrology happen in 2020. So it's kind of like, have we been in 100 Years' War? It's almost 100 years with NATO now. And so what we're seeing is like, what's going to be the end to NATO and Russia and nuclear Cold War stuff? But like, NATO's formed right after World War II. So it's coming to the almost 100 years of that too. So there is something to say about, we're kind of living in a 100-year war.
Yeah.
You
and
didn't think I would
go-
drop that one.
No,
huh?
but you could go back even to World War One then, right? Because
Right.
World War One happens, and then World War Two is sort of, we didn't solve everything from World War One, and Germany is feeling the brunt of what happened after World War One. And something else we didn't look at it, or what I'm not looking at this time because I was focused on England and France, is there were things going on in other regions of Europe at this time too, right? So,
yeah.
again, it's this European-wide era of turmoil with the plague in the middle of it. But then the other thing that I think is interesting, I'm sorry to jump to another topic.
No, you're great.
But something else that's interesting to me is I was looking for, okay, so if Neptune went into Pisces, if it first entered Pisces in 1356, what happens then? And that's the ransom of John II of France. The king of France was captured by Edward the Black Prince, who was the king. He was supposed to be king. He ends up dying before the end of Neptune in Aries, before the end of Neptune in Pisces, I think, I actually think, oh no, he dies while Neptune is in Aries, but he becomes sick at the very end of Neptune in Pisces. So to have a king held, captured in 1356, to me seems crazy that coincides with Neptune starting to go into Pisces. He was anyway, it looks like you have something that you wanted to say though.
No, I actually love what you're saying because I think that when we think about Pisces Neptune, I think the first thing I think we've been too in it to kind of now you might have a shaded view like deception or tired. It could go, we've been feeling it for so long.
Right.
But if you kind of especially since I was doing astrology with Neptune and Aquarius, right? And talking about it coming in to Pisces, that's how you know when you're an astrologer is you've done all the outer planets and their whole transits and moving into new signs and knowing how to prepare people and stuff like that. And you've done these Venus retrogrades many times before, and you've done that and you've seen the Mercury retrogrades and how they work and fully, and remember every Venus retrograde and connecting to an outer planet or not. So what I always used to think of Neptune is it's spiritual magical, though there's a mystical quality, right? When you kind of fade away. And so I'll share with my kind of weird mind about the research I did for this topic today was I wanted to find any hidden drivers or esoteric undercurrents that were shaping this whole this whole conflict. Also the economic and financial tensions or secret power struggles involving suppressed nightly orders and banking interests, papal politics, and the invocation of mystic symbols and prophecies, because there's actually tons that come through this whole period. Right?
You went for everything.
I did go for everything.
It all. Okay.
And so, but the main part of the war is the competing claims to the sacred authority, especially the legacy of Charlemagne, which added the mythic dimension. So there is this weird idolization. That's also part of Jupiter. Jupiter's the idol. I mean, Jupiter, by the way, you should watch my whole thing about Baal. My special, because if you're praying to Jupiter, or you love Jupiter, Jupiter is Baal in your chart. Same figure, same person. But anyway, that if you think about it, it's this idolization because Jupiter rules over Pisces too, and so Neptune brings this hyper the more it's kind of scarier because it's a little bit more, you're not thinking or having any analytics at all about it. You're just oh, this is my idol. It's very culty, right? So there's that comes in. And so I think that's an interesting thing, just tapping into the understanding that in this 100 Years War and where we're going to go into today, it's very interesting that when it does leave Pisces, the mystic allure kind of is running out.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I'd put it. When it gets to the end, it's kind of oh, wait, the magic trick's not working anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff, but I'd love to go with where you, where your research really had got you to get to this point, where you were like, let me look at this.
Yeah, I guess, it was just the whole idea of the fact that the war, well, actually, no, it's this, that I was thinking, okay, so when I look back on this Neptune and Pisces transit and see how it was wild, I want to know, and I'm sure everybody wants to know, okay, what's really going to happen when Neptune goes into Aries? And everybody is so focused on, okay, all this other new wild stuff's going to happen when Neptune goes into Aries. But for me, when I looked at this 100 Years' War that spans across all the way from Neptune in Aquarius and ends when Neptune is in Aries, you can actually look at these pivot points in the war and you can see how at the beginning, it's really the queen wants to make a claim for her son, and it's contested, and it's probably much more land-based, or, the claims make sense because you want to expand your power, and power in Europe in the medieval times goes to the land, right? So it starts with that kind of an old-fashioned claim. But by the time you get to the end and Joan of Arc appears for the French, it's gained this whole new level of, a saint is on our side, right?
Right.
And I think Neptune's in Aries by then, right? Which probably makes sense too. But by then, everybody probably has bought into this whole subtle, subconscious or unconscious thing about what it means to be on your side. Like in the process of this, people, like before, okay, think about it. You have a queen who's French by birth, and you have a king who also is speaking French because that was the culture of the court. By the end of this time, English has been defined as an identity, right? Because the monarchs accept Middle English. I can't remember what the date is, where they start to actually use English as their daily life. So it's throughout this whole time that they're forming this new identity that emerges by the end that people probably didn't even realize was under the surface baking or becoming something. And so, yeah, that's a really interesting part of looking at this history. It starts in one world and ends in a completely different one.
Or that right as the war starts, that the popes were French.
Yeah, exactly.
So not only is it reminds me of like Canada, how people live in Canada and they're like, you really have to make everything in French? Like,
in parts
for
of
such
Canada.
a small, for just this one little area.
Yeah.
But they have influence on the whole country, which is one of the largest countries in the world, right? Land-wise, right? It's like, what? So as in English, right? It's like the French are everywhere. And I think there's that big part, right? And it wasn't like popes back then are as neutral as now. They showed favor to who they wanted to show favor to. And it's interesting because in the history of the papacy at that time, there is this really weird moment. Of course, we know, like with what happened with the Templar Knights, we know that, it's kind of like, we don't want to look like the people who caused the problems in many ways. But I think that like the papacy at that point is picking its favors and picking who the Pope is through cardinals and backdoor deals. That's always happened. But it's kind of interesting that a lot of those backdoor deals kind of actually like turned more than just religious kind of looks at things, or the queen, right? That's too involved, too close to the king, but also the economic issues that happen. There's actually one of the greatest collapses in human history in 1345, ironically enough, that is really connected to then causing depression throughout tons of countries. And so then there's poverty, and then there's the Black Plague that comes. So it is kind of like living in Biden's America. A plague, inflation of money, acting like everyone's killing it when every asset bought has lost so much. And inflation and rates raised, all these kind of things. Like, it's like that's like an interesting reminder for people, is that there's that many things. Then there was the Great Western Schism that happened in 1378. And so that actually connects more of like where we get into this. And then there's the anti-pope, right? So then there starts to become like contested pope energy. So it's not just monarch, it's then contested pope. Because everybody's religion is the same. Oh, we're here for Christ. But it's weird that all the popes at the time were also claiming roots to Charlemagne. So it wasn't just about the monarchs, it was also about the popes. And what blows my mind is that's actually more of the Muslim Muhammad way of like how rulers ruled in Muslim countries. And we still see today in Iran with Ayatollahs that my blood is Muhammad's blood.
Right.
So it's following a Muslim similar thing about the prophet, but it's not the prophet. It's like Charlemagne is the one that brings the church and the empire together for the Holy Roman Empire, or for the Roman Empire to actually like become the Holy Roman Empire that's actually like got power that it never got to see, because right after 325 AD and Constantine, there's the fall of Rome pretty quick. So actually, it's really interesting that it's actually religious in the background of all of it.
It is very strange, because also Christianity is supposed to be about, and I know, I'm talking about the religion that emerged from the followers of Christ after his death, like right after his death. Or supposed death, or whatever you think. But there became this group of people who were followers of Christ, and they were not unified in a church, right? And his whole message, or the whole message that exists in the Gospels, is the story of it not being about the lineage, but about, you're sharing in the body and blood of Christ, that Christ energy, or the Christ consciousness. And that's how you belong. But it's really quickly taken over by the Roman Church, and it becomes about the blood again, right?
Right.
And Charlemagne, it's about the blood in a man. And then all these kings fighting and their queens, it's again about blood and who. And also, though, like I will say that Isabella and, what they're bringing to this by making a claim is that we all share this blood, but now they're bringing in a secular element also that you have to prove that you can actually rule. There's that element. And then there's a legal element, because France actually then decides at that point, no, actually, legally, a woman, the line for a monarch can't pass through a woman. And that happens in this time too.
Which I think is really interesting, because if it is true that, it wouldn't be in Braveheart if there wasn't enough claims about Edward II having, let's just say, male on male relationship that crosses the line into that, right?
Well, that happens too after Edward III. When his son dies, the Black Prince, right, who's supposed to be Edward IV, Richard II becomes king, who is the Black Prince's son, right? And he is always depicted as an overly artistic, poetic, effeminate, maybe gay figure.
Yeah, so it's almost like the pendulum in American politics, right? When it gets too far left or too far right, we like to swing back to the center. And monarchs, if they are too, sometimes there's times where, gosh, it's nice to have a gracious king, right? Because after we've been through a hellish rule, especially Edward I was really difficult with him and the Scots and letting York just be taken and just like throwing troops into Scotland and just going hardcore, and then forcing Englishmen to bed Scottish women so that the line of Englishmen and that would be born in women, that it would be English blood, because then they got into bloodlines. So it actually it's really hard to find that defining place of where it really starts, because all these things are happening prior to it.
And by the way, during the 100 Years' War, there's another Scottish claim. Scotland is connected with France so that they can try to make inroads in England. So there's David II, I think, was king of Scotland at that time, who was also trying to do an invasion.
I have this one thing to bring up that connects with all that. So some of the esoteric undercurrents, of course, go to the Templar Knights. But it was both France and England that had draped themselves in all this sacred symbolism. So like the fleur-de-lis, for example, right? That's something that is shared. If you go to England, you're going to see the fleur-de-lis. If you go to France, you're going to see the fleur-de-lis. And that's never been a contested thing between both countries. It's an honor, like both countries honor it, even though it definitely has a French name. But we have to remember there were Norman Knights, there were, that were in England,
and
like
the English
but
monarchs. French.
The fleur-de-lis is like, I would say, one of the more sacred ones. But what's really interesting is then after the fall, right? Because there was also, the Templars are rumored to guard the occult secrets like the Holy Grail, the lost treasure, and the forbidden knowledge. And the dramatic downfall that happened in 1307 to 1314 gave birth to conspiracy theories. So conspiracy theories have been around forever, right? But that surviving Templars went underground, or that their curse doomed the French monarchy, since some French history suggests that Templar refugees may have aided England or its allies. For instance, legends claims that ex-Templars fought alongside the Scots at Bannockburn in 1314, seeking revenge on King Philip, who was the French king. While concrete evidence is scant, the mythos of the vengeful Templar added an aura of divine retribution to France's ensuring woes. Indeed, Maurice Druin's historical novel series, The Accursed Kings, popularized the idea that Philip IV's sins against the Templars and others led directly to the cursed succession that sparked the war. So there's that element too, is like.
And when the Templar Knights were dissolved, I guess, and executed and all of that, was it 1304? What do you remember? What year does it say?
1307 is the year of Friday the 13th, 1307.
And was it?
And that's where the irony of esoteric spiritualism that we all follow today about Friday the 13th being a bad day. I mean, that's an 700 year thing. No.
Yeah. And we looked at that before, and I'm wondering, is it Pluto and Capricorn at that time, or was it Pluto? Like, I remember, it seems like, when does Pluto and Capricorn happen? And
well, for the 1307, just have fun for people, like 1307.
Or is that Pluto and Aquarius?
It's Pluto 30 years back with Pluto and Aries, and then all the way through Pisces. It's going to be, I think, at the end of Aquarius. It might be beginning of Pisces. It's Pluto is in, where's Pluto? Oh, just went into, like I said, Pisces, end of Aquarius, beginning. Oh, you can't see it. That's why. There we go. There it is. Pluto at the beginning of Pisces. But I just picked a random day in May.
It's just interesting because at that time, Pluto was going first and then Neptune came
Neptune was in Scorpio. Yeah, but Neptune was the one that would come after during the 100 Years' War. But Pluto seeds the whole entire downfall of the Knights Templar. So actually, if you were to like look at it, because we're kind of in the we're not in the opposite, right? We're in Neptune now, forward and coming into Aries, and Pluto's in Aquarius, right? So it's like, well, that's the opposite. This is what's weird about Neptune and Pluto's orbits, is there's actually these periods where Pluto is actually closer to the sun than Neptune. So actually Neptune's the farthest planet out.
So right now Neptune's
We're back
farther.
to where it's Neptune is the second part, but Pluto is the farthest planet out. But actually, it's during the Reformation times that the orbit of Neptune and Pluto shift to where Neptune goes farther out than the sun and Pluto's closer to the sun. The same way that Mercury and Venus do that, Mercury and Venus, that like, that people think, oh, like Venus is closer to Earth. There's actually times where Mercury is closer to Earth than Venus. So Mercury is closest to Earth and the sun.
Interesting.
But like, you wouldn't think about that by looking at just it going around, right? Like if you do those things. So that's what's really interesting, is like, this is a time period where, of course, like Pluto-Neptune conjunctions are the longest. We're still running off the 1880s of Pluto, Neptune, and Gemini. Has not come close yet, as Neptune is faster and Pluto's slower, and Pluto's not catching up with Neptune yet. But there does come in the orbit when Neptune does get farther away and Pluto gets closer to the sun, and Pluto starts gaining speed to catch up with Neptune.
Yeah, I remember you said that was when we really kind of entered the modern world, right? Or the modern era.
Oh, yeah.
That's when things really shifted to to the world we have now.
But if you think about 1307, I mean, there's all that Scorpio stuff again, Saturn Scorpio. So it's now the next Saturn Scorpio that starts the 100 Years' War. And that one was Saturn and Neptune conjunct, like we're about to have now. Right? Or that's Saturn and Uranus. So that's even crazier than even what we're in. If you think about it, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, 1307, that's why events that happen during these kind of bigger periods, like we're in with Saturn, Neptune at the beginning of Aries, they'll live for hundreds, centuries, even maybe millennia. The little something out of it.
So every time another planet passes that point,
well, if it's like very significant and rare. So that's rare to have Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and especially there in Scorpio. And there's also Jupiter. So you can see right there that there's conjunctional astrology at its finest, that an astrologer back in the day would have said 4 planets that big. And even though they didn't use the outer planets, it would have been Jupiter, Saturn, which they used a lot. But you would have just been able to like track during the year of 1306 and 1307, knowing Saturn and Jupiter are going to be together. And then when do all these other planets come by it? And if Mars comes by, oh no, something bad's about to happen this year. And it's going to be definitely probably night-based, because nights are definitely with Scorpio.
Wow.
Right? So that's an interesting chart. If you also notice in 1307, there was a lot of retrogrades. Pluto was retrograde, Mars was retrograde, Jupiter was retrograde, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn. And Venus. And there's Venus opposite Jupiter, and they're both retrograde. Every planet retrograde except for Mercury.
Wow.
The last time that happened, the closest was in 1984 for us. Again, with a Saturn in Scorpio. So actually, this is what I think seeds
the 100 Years' War.
Yeah, that it's all about the Holy War, and the way that, you know, you're looking at your king, like King Richard I, right? And he's willing to go in. Right? That's where the whole, you know, story goes for what's the name? Robin Hood, right? Is like, Richard's gone and his brother, King John, or what, right? King John's in and we all hate him, right? But he's out there fighting the fight, and he's doing the quest, the holy quest, right? And so nobody likes King John because he's if you watch if you watch the Disney version of that movie, Edward II is very much like King John the lion that hangs out with a snake, right? He sucks his thumb, mommy, 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 and he gets a tarot reading done by a bear and by a fox dressing as women. You know what I mean? So I think there is that kind of vibe that kind of is that whole existence of what kind of comes into all this. Back then, of course, Neptune in Scorpio, right? So if you think about like the last Neptune Pisces, the Civil War. Well, back when Neptune was in Scorpio, back in like the Neptune comes into Pisces. So watch, this is what you would do in this point. You would just go like you would go ingress of Neptune. Let's just use the ingress of Neptune Pisces to cross over that point. And so 1356, 1307, so it's about 49 years. So 49 years to like 2011, let's say. Let's think of some Neptune, Scorpio, kind of more modern history, 50 years ago history from 2011, which would have been the 60s, which... Like Vietnam, right? There's Vietnam. There's Watergate. The deception of the killings of JFK and MLK, and so there's this like distrust that actually finally came out with Neptune and Pisces, and people being like, I don't trust the government. Plus with UFOs, right? Everybody's seeing them for all these years, and then they act like nothing's happening through Neptune Pisces till the end. Mm-hmm. It's always till the end.
Interesting.
So, because it rules endings. So it's like, oh,
poor Black Prince, whatever Prince Edward then.
Right.
He got his ending at the end of Neptune in Pisces.
So like that's where if we take this and we go to Aries now. This is where I know that you were doing the history. So it's 1370. That's the first ingress of Neptune into Aries. So if we just take the next look again, It was 1370 in the retrograde. That would have been us just a couple months ago, right? Mm-hmm. And then Neptune finally coming back to meet in 0 Aries and be there for sure by January 23rd of 1371. So that's like our February 20th. Of course, it had Jupiter, but Jupiter met with Neptune in Pisces, just like it did for us back in 2022. So there's some good astrology of a connection point that could help us lead to this Neptune Aries cycle. Is like there was a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction prior in Pisces, both rulers of Pisces conjuncting, and the same with the Civil War.
Wow.
1856.
Yeah. And we've looked at that one.
And we've looked at that one a lot. So it's like, so actually
too.
What you've just, this is all in on today's show. What you've stumbled on is actually seeing a pattern that's replaying itself for the Civil War and at our time. And now we're investigating this one.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at this, this is where I looked at, okay, so why was March 1370 to February 1371 a pivotal period for the 100 Years' War? And I had asked, what unraveled for England, because it does seem like a turning point. And so this whole time, Edward the Black Prince had been out on the battlefield, and his father brought him out too, and he was the conquering hero. So he would be the one who's like a knight in the Crusades or something, but now he's going around Europe trying to claim all this territory for England, trying to claim his ancestral right to these lands, because it's in him that those lands all come together, right? And all's going well, but he's at this battle in Castile, and he comes back with a debilitating illness. And by 1370, he can barely command. So he attempts to lead military operations in Aquitaine. The illness forces him to move slowly, withdraw often, and delegate critical decisions. His once formidable strategic clarity blunts under physical strain. So he sees him as a fading star, not a rising one. And of course, by then he's 50, I think, or something. Then there are bad decisions politically by England. Local resentment grows against English rule. By then, you have a new French king, Charles V, and it starts to turn better for France at that point. But really, it's because this disease takes out Edward, the prince. And I looked also at...
I was going to say, like, I want to show people the imagery of him. Is like, he's trying to portray the Lancelot, the Black Knight.
Yeah.
And even in these images that are painted of him, you could almost cross-reference them with any of the Lancelot imagery. The issue would have been, though, with any commoner at that time period, you would have been upset. Like, you're ruining Lancelot's, like, mythology that it's ingrained in me. Right?
Yeah. Well, or he's supposed to be living up to it.
He's correct.
But then all of a sudden he gets a disease.
Right. So no, it's like, there is no images. Like the thing about Lancelot is he makes it through everything, even in being insane for a moment, like all these things, but like, like just like anything where it's like the fallen or just like him, it's almost like this guy's really trying to copy it in many ways. I mean, of course, I'm a Lancelot, freak, so I would have been mad.
And of course, they would have been deliberately doing that at this time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like...
because they were all about the chivalrous
that top
tales.
right image, right? Or this.
Yeah, or I'm trying to see. I had some pulled up from the time. You just have to look.
Or like his casket, too. Of course, he gets buried like as a knight.
Yeah.
You could see all the Scorpio, Saturn, Mars themes from 1337, right? Like retrograde. Like whenever Mars, Saturn together, that's past life night or night energy or whatever. Right. So we'll go back to
It's interesting too that he was born June 15th. And that's Julian. So he was probably a Gemini. And I think we've seen a lot of monarchs that have significant placements in Gemini. And I can't remember, Prince Arthur, because I think of Henry's ascension to the throne. He wasn't supposed to be king either. And Arthur, the one who was named after King Arthur, dies. And here again, you have this prince who's supposed to become the monarch, who is embodying this Arthurian legend quality, and he dies before he becomes king. I mean, Arthur, same thing, right?
Right.
So I think that's interesting as well.
Yeah, and I think too, astrologically, it's like the Neptune ingress Aries chart for the second time, the full ingress of 1371, it has Mars in Scorpio at the last degree, at the anaretic degree, right? So there's this Mars Scorpio theme. Whether it's the 1307 death, right? Like there's scorpionic themes of Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter. But then there's also the beginning of the war, Mars retrograde in Scorpio with Saturn. And then you get to this point, and there's a Mars again, and here's Neptune moving into Aries, dispositing that Mars, right? So it's always about the dispositing. So it's like, oh wait, that Neptune's playing the Mars. But when Neptune's in Pisces, it's only playing its own tune. It's not connecting to another planet. That's the problem about Neptune Pisces. At least we can be like Neptune Aries, wherever Mars is at, it kind of becomes more like the fog changes colors and dissipates and gets like normal fog. With Neptune and Pisces, it's just like, nah, the fog ain't going to get bigger. Oh, it does. The wave ain't going to get bigger. Oh, it does. The unconscious ain't going to get bigger. Oh, it does. It just keeps, because there's no planets to disposit to.
In Pisces, you mean?
Correct. When a planet's in its home sign, it's dispositing itself.
Yeah. Huh. So no checks on it.
There's no, well, it can't express itself in any other form but its own version of itself in its full quality. Right.
Well, it's so
like
funny
for me
that
as a Leo sun, I can't disposit any other planet in my chart. Right. But my Jupiter can be disposited to my Saturn because I have it in Capricorn. So my Jupiter in Capricorn is very Saturn Scorpionic because I have Jupiter in Capricorn. And then you want to look at the Saturn. So anybody who has like Venus and Gemini wants to look at their Mercury, that's the dispositing, right? And if they have Mercury in Gemini, oh, that's going to be a really nice Venus, even if it's, right? So like, in Virgo too. If it's Venus, even though you wouldn't see a Mercury that far away from Venus, like that's where it gets, the closer the planets to the sun and Earth, the farther away, like Neptune, for example. Oh, Mars is kind of a nice one because it's 2 years around the zodiac. So the fog is going to go through multiple colors over 2 years, and it's considered the first planet out beyond the Earth, right? So it is an outer planet. But it's the outer planet that goes quicker.
Yeah.
But it does it's an interesting ingress. Plus it also has Jupiter there. And then it's in semi-square exactly to Pluto. Oh, no, it's not. It's actually 35 degrees. I thought that was 15. But it's in, So, that's an interesting moment in the 100 Years' War because it's adding the quality now of Mars now becoming, ironically, how does it really come to its closure is Henry V, who really is the one who lives up to being a monarch that rules based upon the ideas of being on the battlefield and not losing and not being afraid and not getting an illness and being seen very Chiron-y, right? Like wounded, which the chart of during when his reign is Chiron in Capricorn with Saturn, right? So that's already going to be dispositing Saturn.
Yeah, and he lost all of his glamour after that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, he's not invincible? Oh, okay. Well, who are we going to look to next? Like, what's going to be next?
So Saturn strips away any glam.
Oh, I was just looking at Henry V to see his birth date.
Right, so he's born after the Neptune ingress in Aries. So he has Neptune in Aries ingressed when he was born in his chart. Or it would have been, near the end. He has Neptune at probably I don't know. I could pull up Henry V. Let's just check real quick because he's going to have Neptune at the end of Aries, just if you do the math. 15 years, for sure, he'll have it. He will have it. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just what I'm learning from all of these shows we've been doing is that there, something about the larger story. It's not just about the monarchs, and it's not that we're looking at political history and not everyone else. It's like there's this larger, crazy sacred story or something that's playing out that you can look at. Right. You can see what's going on by looking at Neptune, for example.
Oh, actually, he's got Neptune in Taurus.
And Pluto. So what does that mean?
Wait, 71, 15 years? Okay. Now, this is where Neptune's going really quick. Pluto's catching up to Neptune. So this is where Pluto's going away from its closeness and Neptune's... Oh yeah, Neptune is close. Oh yeah, this is when Neptune is in its faster speed and Pluto is really far out. Yeah, that's where it happens. And that's why we see Neptune, Pluto's really come into the Taurus Gemini space. There's something about that's where they're coming. So that's where it kind of has this really weird effect to see Neptune catch up to Pluto. Because you just saw that 15 years prior, it was like, they're 35 degrees apart. Now it's like, what? They're 15, not even? It's about to happen. It's interesting that Henry V has South Node Mars conjunct in Capricorn and a North Node Moon in Cancer with Saturn. So even though he's known for his battles, I think it's the comfort he brings through the battles. It's more about the comfort he brings. Like, oh, finally, a king who's got some balls. A king who's not afraid. That's the comfort.
And he also marries a French wife so that he can bring the lines
who he's
together,
not going to let
ideally.
just take over.
But unfortunately, France gains momentum after that a little bit. So
yeah, but I think it's about the minds of the people in life. I think that's the other thing is the perspective. Neptune's about perspective as well. And so there's a quality of him having the stability. Plus he has that Jupiter Leo in square to Pluto. And so it's like this guy leads with his heart. He shows us, he teaches us that you can, what we own, what we value, our values, they are one. I mean, I don't want to do a Henry V or Shakespeare thing or anything, but that's why Shakespeare used Henry V too.
That's why his best speeches,
right.
Some of his best work is in his play Henry V.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, and if some of the, I won't even call them rumors, but if the esoteric versions of Shakespeare are true, of course, all those occultists and astrologers would have used Henry V because of his chart. Right? Like this is a very strong chart, right? He's also a Libra, right? So it's like you would think he's not a battler, but he actually is in a way because it's the justice and the injustice that's happened.
Yeah.
So, but as far as your look at what you were seeing, like, do you think in the English history, the war starts? Where does it actually, like, do you feel in that 100 years have its big turning points, like, or change on the people around the world? Like, does it go on and then the Black Plague happens and then it kind of fizzles out for a little bit?
Well, the Black Plague definitely does play a role in extending it. I mean, it's just that it happens and nothing's been solved, but it can't continue on like it had because people are dying and dealing with the plague. And so it just continues on for so many years. Also, you have to remember at this time, I mean, now this would be more compact into a shorter period of time because we have airplanes and modern technology and ships and all that. At this time, it was, you have to mobilize your troops and gather your people and get to the location and have your battles. And it's much more slow progress when you're actually making
right.
inroads.
So it's kind of interesting. So the death of the king is 1376. So it's like Neptune ingress into Aries through 1370 into 71 is really just about this guy who's saying he's going to do all this and he doesn't.
Well, and then the king dies the next year. So the Black Prince dies, the king dies, and then the Black Prince's son comes to the throne, and the momentum is done there, right? So,
that reminds me of Neptune in Aries with, like people in the South during the Civil War with Jefferson Davis and especially with Robert E. Lee, and then it fizzles out. And then Abraham Lincoln, it fizzles out.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that Henry, it doesn't fizzle out, but if you were connected to the Pope, it's watching the Pope, if you're an Englishman, watching it fizzle out. And if you're a Catholic, watching England fizzle out. Mm-hmm. So there's always what you've propped up in Aries, a person, an identification of something, you watch it go.
And that whatever gets propped up has built its mythology with Neptune and Pisces.
Correct.
Right?
Big time.
And so everybody's already in condition to think, that's it, that's the greatest thing. But to me, what this timeline shows you, if you go even to the Battle of Agincourt, and I don't know what is the astrology at that point, but that's Henry V's big victory. But then, so everybody puts their faith in, look at this guy, he can lead. And then that fizzles out because his son can't maintain his style of leadership. It's more about the charisma of kings, and that you can't hold that. Joan of Arc, meanwhile, rallies the French behind the Dauphin, the true heir to the French throne. And it's another personality that gets people moving.
Right.
And I think, to me, one of the lessons is there's always a legend being built and a person being propped up who's supposed to be out there fighting for particular values or lineage or whatever it is. And the mistake is to follow that person blindly, or to think they're going to solve all the problems. Because in the end, what's so funny, and even with Henry VIII, for all of the fighting that he did to try to make sure he got that male heir, it didn't last, right? And he had his succession in mind. And anytime someone tried to thwart it, it's still, everything went as it was supposed to.
Right.
So I always come back to that we kind of delude ourselves and make our lives much more difficult. But I don't know if there's any other way. I feel like after having just survived Neptune and Pisces, almost, knock on wood that we survive it. When does it get out into Aries? At the end of January or something?
January 26th, yeah.
So
out of Pisces, yeah.
What did I say?
Aries, but it's
Pisces.
It's
when
okay
it gets
because
into Aries,
we're on the cusp.
I'm just deluded totally.
Remember that Neptune station direct today at 29 degrees in like 32 minutes, right? So it's actually closer to Aries than Pisces, but it's in Pisces.
Yay! But anyway,
but if that makes sense,
yeah,
right? Like it's still in Pisces, but it's closer to the cusp point.
So I don't know if we've shown people that things will get better or not, but
no, I think that what I think the big part is that whatever you're fantasizing about coming into Neptune Aries, you better be careful. Like my life's going to go this direction and it's going to be this. Yeah.
Your prince might catch a deadly disease in Spain,
right?
And that'll be it.
Like you don't want to be in that mystical, I can pull a rabbit out of the hat again. Mm-hmm. This is where, you realize that it's Penn and Teller. Right? It's like, oh no. Or I have some random last facts because I do have to go. But here's the astrology part. That during that whole war, that English and French leaders constantly consulted astrologers for tactical and strategic guidance. So there's something always about Neptune, Pisces back into Aries, right? That's the only way to make sense of anything, actually, is astrology. You can't make sense off just your pure, just logic or what the world tells you or whatever, because you're going to get hurt. And nearly every major court had astrology advisors at that period. And Edward III is said to have consulted his astrologer before his major military campaigns. So there's that. Also, the astrological talisman ritual to repel the English was used by Charles V's astrologer.
I think we're going to have to explore this.
Yeah, this will be where we go next. And of course, great. The Black Death. Of course, the astrologers predicted the conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, which I was talking about in 1345. 1345 is also the big. We need to go into this whole period because there was all these. Edward defaulted on the loans of 1343, and there was 900,000 florins owed to the Bardi and 600,000 to the Peruzzi, and the resulting bankruptcies of these major banks in 1345 shattered the confidence and helped trigger a wider economic depression. Was he informed of the astrology about the plague? The same thing happened with COVID.
Wow.
That people know the astrology before. Why did all the CEOs pull out December 2019 and step down as CEOs, sell all their stock, and then the greatest stock market crash, one of them in history, is March of 2020, right? And then the injection of all the money to save it again.
Wow.
Right? So I think when people kind of look deeper into all these things, there's also the Charlemagne's legacy. And I think that's going to be our next one. Is why is it all connected to there? Okay. And the direct, line, and why is that so important? And what makes him so special? I think that history, and then looking at the astrology of just Charlemagne himself and how it connects to the Plantagenet family, the Holy Roman Emperor and the German emperors claim lineage, right? Because there's always going to be lineage off a female, right? Always. So that's the interesting part. When you try and cut that off, you're actually shooting yourself in the foot and trying to keep it just within one line. You actually kind of want all these other lines to connect so you can be able to claim a Charlemagne line.
Right.
If that's what you're trying to do, right? You don't want to cut yourself off and just be like, well, every wench in just this tavern, you know what I mean? Like, well, none of them are connected. Sorry, you know, like we brought these in from Papua New Guinea, you know, I don't know. Like, you know, and then of course the papacy that claims that line stuff. So there's a lot. I had so much to bring here, but yeah, right. I've got to go. But
yeah, well, we'll do that next time.
I think that people need to start, like looking at, I think that delusion of the identity is like another way to look at it. And we can, of course, go more into that whole entire like moment of the king dying and his son and just this, a copycat king, or like a copycat of like a myth in many ways. Doesn't work. Yeah.
Well, even the king or the prince who was like a copycat of Lancelot.
Right.
In the end, you're real. You're going to die. So you can't ever live up to that image.
Right. And Pope Clement dies right after the Reformation.
Right.
So there's something about, I wouldn't want to be a leader coming into Pisces with all promising everything and then coming into Aries. Right? Because it ain't going to go the way you think. I think that's why people think with Trump right now, like, why does it feel off? Because that's not going to be what's being promised based off the astrology. And it's nothing to do with him. It has everything to just do with the way that the astrology, the universe is setting things up. It wants us to experience a dissolve of like, nope, this guy couldn't pull it off. Right?
Yeah.
So it'll be fun to do the next one.
Yeah.
So, all right, everyone. Well, we'll see you on the next one. Let us know on comments on the show what you guys think and where you'd like us to go. I think that next one will be crazy fun. Yeah. So, all right, everyone. Great. Take care.
Bye.